Tarasata Shishimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Arigor Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So we'll just sum up a little bit. Srila Prabhupada has detected some poison in the society from some of his leading disciples. He feels that they're trying to remove him and take over power within the society. So the ones that he felt needed rectification, did he kick them out? No. He gave them sannyas as a special corrective method. And he sent them out preaching because that's all we had to do in those days. We simply had Sankirtan, a little bit of temple worship. That's all. So now this picture is years later, 6 years later, when Prabhupada had many, many disciples. Before Prabhupada made the 4 sannyasis, that's Vishnujan Swami, Brahmananda Swami, Gargamuni Swami, and Subal Swami, there was only one sannyasi in the society, and that was Kirtanananda Swami, and he was overseeing our New Vrindavan project. Prabhupada's later instructions and letters would set forth general directions for the GBC secretaries. They should travel regularly to the temples in their respective zones to assure that each devotee chanted 16 rounds and followed a regulated schedule, and that the temples were clean. His 12 GBC secretaries would relieve him of management, and they would rectify present and future difficulties within the society. So we have here a picture of 5 of the 12. You have Jagadish here, Shyamsundar, Bhagavan, Balimardan, and Karundar. And each one of them were assigned to different zones around the world for overseeing the management and specifically to uphold the spiritual practices of the devotees by making sure that they're all chanting 16 rounds, following the regulative principles, and attending the temple programs. That rectification would be possible only when the devotees in each temple engaged fully in regulated devotional service, rising early for Mangal Artik at 4:30, attending Srimad Bhagavatam class and reciting the Sanskrit verses, and chanting in the streets and distributing Back to Godhead magazines and other Krishna conscious literature. This emphasis on strictly following Krishna conscious principles would supersede all material formulas of management. The GBC would ensure that in their appointed zones, all the devotees were properly engaged. There would be no Maya. Can you make this rotate so it hits everybody? Press the button up top. Does it work? No, don't move it, just rotate it. So that it moves. Yes, that's right. Thank you. Doesn't rotate. Yeah, it's. Doesn't work. Huh? All right. Okay. So by this time, it was 1970, July. We had now 34 temples around the world. Most of them were in America, because that was what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati told Prabhupada to do, to preach in the English-speaking countries. but he had sent to India a few of his devotees. So we had a center now in Calcutta. We had a center in West Germany. We had a center in London and in Montreal, Canada, in Paris, France. So one by one, Prabhupada was finding some of his very sincere disciples who wanted to assist him in carrying out the orders of his spiritual master. This was phase one of ISKCON. Prabhupada had a specific instruction from his spiritual master, and in this phase one, he was carrying it out to preach in the English-speaking countries. Now he had just sent 2 devotees to Tokyo. That was Sudama Das and another devotee, Balimardan Das, who joined him there later. Then Sudama's wife, Chintamani, came. So when Prabhupada became discouraged, seeing that in America, he felt that the poison had spread and the devotees were no longer respecting him properly as a spiritual master, some Mayavadi philosophy had entered in, he decided to leave America and he went to Tokyo. The next day, Prabhupada drafted another significant statement naming Bhagavan, Rupanuga, and Kurandar trustees of his Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. So his first document was the GBC, Governing Body Commission, and he named his 12 foremost disciples to do the management. And next he wrote a trust deed for the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, and he assigned 3 of his responsible disciples, Bhagavan, Rupanuga, and Kurandar, as trustees of the BBT. The Bhaktivedanta Book Trust account will be used to publish my books and literature and to establish temples throughout the world. Specifically, 3 temples are to be established, 1 each in Mayapur, Vrindavan, and Jagannath Puri. So do we have a temple in Jagannath Puri? We do? Yeah, very nice. So the 3 temple places where Prabhupada wanted the temples, Mayapur, Vrindavan, and Jagannath Puri, were carried out. You can see if you enter into our temple on the left-hand side, there's a donation plaque. And right there at the top, the BBT is there because Prabhupada wanted the proceeds of his book distribution to go to establishing specifically temples in these 3 holy dhams. Since returning to America in 1967, Prabhupada had often quipped that he'd stay there permanently as the adopted son of his disciples. Now he revealed new plans. He spoke of going to India to preach and to establish large ISKCON temples. For the devotees who based their activities mostly in small rented houses, Prabhupada's constructing cathedral-like buildings in India was inconceivable. In India, Prabhupada said he would teach his disciples how to preach and how to establish temples. So now we're starting what's called phase 2. Prabhupada had successfully carried out, to some extent, the orders of his spiritual master. The holy name had not yet been heard in every town and village, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had predicted, but he had fortresses in the form of temples and disciples now traveling all over the world. Now, Prabhupada had a particular desire, and that was, he gave an example. He said, if you have a big tree and you want to cut down that tree, what do you use? You use a piece of wood from the tree with a foreign element, which is the axe head. So Prabhupada had this amazing idea that now he had many foreign disciples. And when he was trying to preach in India, in Jhansi, in Lucknow, in Delhi, here in Vrindavan. He was not getting much success. No one wanted to give their children to him to train. No one was helping him much with the distribution and the printing of his books. So he considered the entire Vedic society in India to be like a big tree, but it wasn't functioning right now. So with the use of an axe, with that foreign element, he wanted to take his foreign disciples back here to India and show them that you all are trying to imitate America and the Western countries. These Americans have given up everything of their culture and accepted your Vedic culture. So it's very interesting philosophy Prabhupada had, and obviously it worked. Here you all are. Prabhupada picked a team, including two newly initiated sannyasis. That was Devananda Swami, who was Prabhupada's secretary at the time, and Kartikeya Swami. Prabhupada that day, when he made the four sannyasis, he made those two also as sannyasis, Kartikeya and Devananda, and he wanted them to travel with him to India. In the future, he said, more disciples could join him, for India would become an important field for Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada wrote Satsvarup and Uddhava in Boston. You are all my children, and I love my American boys and girls who are sent to me by my spiritual master, and I have accepted them as my disciple. Before coming to your country, I took sannyas in 1959. I was publishing BTG since 1944. After taking sannyas, I was more engaged in writing my books without any attempt to construct temples or to make disciples like my other godbrothers in India. So now Prabhupada's, his concept is slightly shifting for India, because as we know in India, there are thousands upon, just in Vrindavan alone, there are over 5,000 temples. What to speak of the entire country? So now Prabhupada wanted to establish these ISKCON temples all over India, and in that way give the real teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the people living here in this country, because there were so many apasampradayas, misunderstanding of Lord Chaitanya's philosophy. So Prabhupada felt very strongly that with the help of his foreign disciples now, he would be able to establish these temples, and Prabhupada's idea was successful. I was not very interested in these matters because my Guru Maharaj liked very much publication of books than constructing big temples and creating some neophyte disciples. As soon as he saw that his neophyte disciples were increasing in number, he immediately decided to leave this world. To accept disciples means to take up the responsibility of absorbing the sinful reaction of life of the disciple. So when we surrender to a spiritual master, what he does is, at the time of initiation, he wipes off the slate of your karma, because now you're giving up the four mahapaps, the four regulative principles. So that is a great responsibility of the spiritual master, to accept all the sinful reactions of his disciples. It is a huge responsibility on the part of the disciple also to make sure that he does not break the four regulative principles, because the spiritual master suffers on account of his disciples' misdeeds. When Prabhupada would get sick, he would say, this sickness is because my disciples are not following the regulative principles. At the present moment in our ISKCON campus, politics and diplomacy has entered. So we started out with very small storefronts, like at 26 2nd Avenue, and then Frederick Street in San Francisco. But gradually, as more and more young people were attracted, we were able to get beautiful temples like in Los Angeles. So wherever there's success, naturally people become greedy for power. And Prabhupada, he noted that this was now happening in the society. He was very unhappy about it. Some of my beloved students, on whom I counted very, very much, have been involved in this matter influenced by Maya. As such, there has been some activity which I consider as disrespectful. So I have decided to retire and divert attention to book writing and nothing more. Now, why did this happen right now? What happened just before this was the 5th San Francisco Rath Yatra. It was huge, 10,000 people, 3 huge carts, and the devotees would not allow Prabhupada to sit on the cart. They drove him all around different parts of the park. And finally, when they took him to the Rath Yatra, they warned Prabhupada that some hoodlums threatened to kill him, and therefore they requested him not to sit on the cart. The Prabhupada couldn't have cared less about the hoodlums. He had come to glorify Lord Jagannath. So because they wouldn't allow him to, although they were sitting on the carts, these leaders, these are the ones that he gave sannyas to. What Prabhupada did was he started to dance ecstatically in front of the carts. And that made all of the thousands and thousands of people go into ecstasy and dance along with him. But from that particular specific incident, he realized that a poison had now entered the society, and they were not understanding him as the authority within the society. They were now trying to take over the power from him and put him in the background. On July 31st, Prabhupada wrote Brahmananda and Gargamuni, explaining why he was leaving for India. In order to set example to my other sannyasi students, I am personally going to Japan with a party of 3 other sannyasi students. So those 3 were Devananda Swami, Kartikeya Swami, and he took along with him also Kirtanananda Swami. So that's 3 sannyasis. Although it is beyond my physical condition, still I am going out so that you may learn the responsibility of sannyas. So Prabhupada was always the type of spiritual master who would teach by example. If he told you to do something, it meant that he already knew how to do it perfectly. So now his new sannyasis, he had sent them out to preach. Preaching. Whenever Prabhupada gave sannyas, he would say the same thing. Now you just go out and preach. You have no fixed place. And he would also tell them to only stay three days in each place. And many of the sannyasis did that. So Prabhupada wanted to set an example for his now newly made sannyasis, that as he is going out, he's giving up the comforts of his wonderful Los Angeles temple. They should also now go out and preach, which they did. When they first took sannyas, they didn't understand that they were being punished. They thought it was a glorious thing. Now they were sannyasis on top of the world. And they went to Boston, they went to New York, they went to Philadelphia, and they just enlivened all the devotees, because Vishnu John, he was like an angel. When you heard him singing, people would automatically become devotees just by his Sankirtan. And all the devotees became enlivened. In Boston, when Vishnu John and the other sannyasis came, instantly 10 devotees joined the temple just by his Sankirtan. So they started out fine. They were preaching nicely, going to the temples, inspiring all the devotees. But then something happened. I am fervently appealing to you all not to create fracture in the solid body of the society. Please work conjointly without any personal ambition. That will help the cause. So you have here an example of working without any personal ambition. This is Sudama Prabhu. He was also a wonderful Sankirtan leader who later took sannyas. And this is his wife, Chintamani. Prabhupada sent them to a country they didn't even know the language. They didn't know Japanese. But they went out and they did what Prabhupada did. They sat down in a park and they started to chant Hare Krishna. And that way they were able to attract people. They got cards printed with the location of their little center. They had Sunday feasts. And exactly as the success was able to happen in America, Prabhupada started sending devotees now to the Asian countries. Bali Mardan, he also went to Japan with Sudama, but he saw there was such a huge field here. We don't need two men here. So he decided he would go and open up all of Australia, all by himself. All by himself he went. He found out where the young people hang out in Sydney, Australia. Same thing, he sat in the park, he started chanting, and devotees were made. Then Prabhupada sent Upendra to help him. So soon Upendra was there. Then he went to Hong Kong. Then he went to Malaysia. Then he went to Indonesia. Then he went to Thailand. All over the Pacific Rim of countries. Bali Mardan did that. He was one of the GBCs that Prabhupada had assigned. So this system worked for spreading Lord Chaitanya's mission. It is the injunction of the Vedas that the spiritual master should not be treated as ordinary man. Even sometimes the spiritual master behaves like ordinary man. It is the duty of the disciple to accept him as a superhuman man. In the beginning of your letter, your comparison of the soldier and the commander is very appropriate. We are on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, one side Maya, the other side Krishna. So this is in reference to a letter that Prabhupada wrote to Brahmananda. So Brahmananda was one of the erring sannyasis, but Brahmananda was trying to understand what mistake he had made and apologized to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada thanked him that now you're understanding one side is Maya, one side is Krishna, and we have to stay on Krishna's side. So the regulative principles of a battlefield, namely to abide by the order of the commander, must be followed. Otherwise, it is impossible to direct the fighting capacity of the soldiers and thus defeat the opposing elements. Now, we had huge opposing elements. No one knew about Krishna in the whole world, practically, except for India and the Hindu diaspora who had gone to different countries. So Prabhupada had a huge task in front of him, and he needed helpers. And these helpers were like soldiers, and he was the commander-in-chief. So they had to work under him, not according to their own ideas. Kindly, therefore, take courage. Let things be rightly done so that our mission may be correctly pushed forward to come out victorious. So eventually, with Brahmananda, what Prabhupada did was he sent him to West Pakistan to open a temple all alone. He started chanting in Pakistan, and the people would throw tomatoes and eggs at him. But the Hindus there, they appreciated him, and now we have temples all over Pakistan, ISKCON temples. And not only did he give him that difficult task, then he told him to open up all of Africa. You know how many countries there are in Africa? So many countries. So Brahmananda, he went and he did exactly what Prabhupada told him to do, because now he was back on track. He was doing what Prabhupada instructed. Prabhupada wrote other letters revealing his plans to travel in India. Our life is very short. The Krishna consciousness movement is not meant for fulfilling one's personal ambition, but it is a serious movement for the whole world. I am therefore going to the Eastern Hemisphere, beginning from Japan. We are going four in a party, and all of us are sannyasis. In this old age, I'm going with this party just to set an example to my disciples who have taken recently the sannyas order. So that's what Srila Prabhupada did eventually. When he saw that someone was very sincere and he felt that they could actually follow the principle of sannyas, he would award them with sannyas, immediately send them to Russia, to South America, to New Zealand, all over the world. He would send his sannyasi disciples to open up temples. In the beginning, he was sending the grihastas because they had a lot of success, for instance, in Montreal and in London. But now he had sannyasis, and the sannyasis, they were able to travel and preach without any attachments. So this is a new era for ISKCON. In preparation for Prabhupada's trip to India, Prabhupada's personal assistant, Devananda, now Devananda Swami, asked him questions from the immigration form, mechanically reading the questions and filling in the answers as Prabhupada replied. So he had to go to Japan first. He had to get a visa for Japan. And with any visa application, they ask you just general questions. So, and filling in answers of Prabhupada replied, "Have you ever committed any criminal acts?" Devananda asked, reading from the form. Prabhupada's eyes widened. "You are asking your spiritual master if he did anything criminal?" And he turned to Bhagavan. "You see, I am simply surrounded by people I cannot trust. It is a dangerous situation." Prabhupada sat in his garden the night before his departure. "Don't be disturbed," he told the disciples with him. "We are not going backward. We are going forward. I will reveal everything to you. I will rectify." His strong words and criticisms, he said, had been to enlighten his disciples, to warn them and show them the subtleties of Maya. Purandar mentioned that the temple leaders had arranged that only a few devotees go with Prabhupada the next day to the airport. "Where did this idea come from?" Prabhupada asked. Srimad Bhagavatam instructs that when a saintly person leaves your company, all present should follow the departing vehicle as far as possible until it is out of sight. So this was a major experience in ISKCON when Srila Prabhupada would arrive somewhere or when he would depart. And hundreds of devotees would converge upon the airports with ecstatic kirtan and flowers and sprinkling of rose water and garlands. And it was such an experience to see. And the leaders decided they're only going to let a few people go with Prabhupada. So Prabhupada immediately, on Shastric evidence, dismissed that idea. So the next day, the devotees all accompanied Prabhupada, chanting and dancing behind him through the long corridors of Los Angeles International Airport. After many months with them, he was now leaving. Devotees cried. So we didn't have terrorist alerts in those days. You were allowed to go all the way up to the gate, even without a ticket. You could go anywhere. That's why we distributed so many books in the airports around the world, because devotees could go wherever they wanted in the airport. So just like that, Prabhupada was the only person traveling, but 100 devotees went along with him to the airport, having kirtan. Prabhupada, dressed in new garments, his head freshly shaven, looked effulgent. He sat in the departure lounge, head held high, as grave and unfathomable as ever. He was embarking on a new adventure for Lord Chaitanya. He was old and might not return. He was 74 at that time. He said, but his disciples should continue the Krishna consciousness movement seriously. If you follow this new schedule, he said, you will keep Maya from attacking. And then he left them. En route to Japan, Prabhupada stopped overnight in Hawaii. He stayed in a motel. We had a temple there. Prabhupada had sent his Grihastha couple, Gaurasundar and Govindadasi, to open a temple there. They were artists, and they were the ones who were painting for the Bhakti Godhead magazines every month. And he had to stay in a motel. And Gaurasundar and Govindadasi came to talk with him. Govindadasi wanted Prabhupada to stay and install their deities of Radha and Krishna in the temple. If Gaurasundar agreed, Prabhupada said, he would stay a few days longer to perform the deity installation. Let me consult, Gaurasundar replied. And the next day, Prabhupada flew on to Japan. Now, who was he going to consult with? Prabhupada is saying he's willing to stay to install the deities. So what was going on in Hawaii? Hawaii is the heavenly planets on the earthly planet. All you get is sense gratification there. The people are just driven by sense gratification. It's a resort. The weather is always perfect, and unlimited amount of enjoyment there. So the devotees, they went there, and they were preaching and doing Prabhupada's program, but there was an offshoot of devotees who were led by one young man who was a yogi of some sorts, and the devotees wanted to keep good relationships with them so that eventually these people would all become devotees, and eventually they did. What happened was his name was Sai, and Prabhupada eventually initiated him as Siddhaswarupananda Swami, and all of his disciples who he had collected, he gave to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada initiated all of them, and to stop this cultishness in Hawaii, Prabhupada sent each one of those disciples separately to different temples around the world. He sent them to Montreal, he sent them to London, he sent them to New York, and that way they were able to immediately infiltrate and understand what ISKCON actually is. It was a wonderful experience. But later, some of them couldn't continue following the regulative principles, which was very unfortunate. Because aside from Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON, nobody follows the four regulative principles. So they had joined with that hippie mentality, and it was hard to break that. From Japan, Prabhupada wrote Govindadasi. It is very encouraging to learn that people inquired about me and were eager to hear my speaking. I could have stayed 1 or 2 more days. There was no hurry, but you did not make any arrangement. Can you imagine Prabhupada going it's not easy to go from Los Angeles to Hawaii. Hawaii is right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So he went all the way there to see his disciples. They didn't even invite him to stay at the temple. I personally proposed to Gaurasundar that I shall install the deities, and he replied that, let me consult. But he never informed me of the result of that consultation and with whom he had to consult. So this is the present situation in our ISKCON society. It is clear that a great mischievous propaganda was lightly made, and the effect has created a very unfavorable situation, and I am very much afflicted in this connection. Still, there is time to save the society out of this mischievous propaganda, and I hope all of you combine together to do the needful. This is Prabhupada alone in Hawaii. At the Tokyo airport, Prabhupada was greeted by executives of the Dai Nippon Printing Company, the printers of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the 20,000 monthly copies of Back to Godhead. So previously, when Back to Godhead was restarted in America, the devotees used to do Xerox copies. They bought a machine and they would staple it and distribute it all by themselves. But as the quality of Back to Godhead increased and the quantity, 20,000 per month, so then Prabhupada sent his disciples for the best printers in the world, which at that time was in Japan. And they struck a deal with this company, Dai Nippon. And now Prabhupada was meeting with the executives for the first time. And this is his GBC Kurundar, who was one of the trustees of BBT. Prabhupada and his entourage rode in a limousine, courtesy of Dai Nippon, to a small private apartment about 45 minutes from the temple. Prabhupada had developed a severe cough and several other symptoms of ill health, due, he said, to his disciples' behavior. Yet despite his illness, he would talk for hours of his concern for ISKCON, especially with his current traveling secretary from the GBC, Tamal Krishna. So from the very beginning, what Prabhupada did was he wanted to train his GBC members. He chose them, the 12 of them, but they needed training. So every month he would have a different GBC member become his traveling secretary, and they would be able to have first-hand experience of how Prabhupada handled situations within the society. So this month it was, Prabhupada actually called Tamal Krishna. He was overseeing things in Europe at the time. And when Prabhupada decided that he had to leave America because of this conspiracy, he asked Tamal, "Can you take me away from here?" Tamal said, "I can take you to Europe." "No, that's not far enough." So then he said, "Well, I can take you." Well, they didn't decide where, but Prabhupada finally decided they would go to first Japan and then back to India. So this was the secretary now that Prabhupada was taking with him. Soon after their arrival in Japan, Prabhupada's secretary received a disturbing call from a devotee attending the Janmashtami celebration at New Vrindavan. 4 of the newly initiated sannyasis had arrived, the devotee said, and were teaching a strange philosophy. Devotees were confused. Prabhupada had left America, the sannyasis were saying, because he had rejected his disciples. The sannyasis were blaming themselves and other disciples for not realizing that Prabhupada was actually Krishna. It means that they didn't read Prabhupada's books. It's the first thing that we learn. So, I was here at this New Vrindavan festival because Prabhupada was supposed to come to this festival for Janmashtami. Prabhupada left in August, like August 2nd, to go to Japan. And August 24th was supposed to be the big Janmashtami festival. It was going to be the biggest festival ISKCON had ever had. And devotees were flying in from all over the world because Prabhupada was supposed to come for that festival. But then Prabhupada, out of disgust, decided not to come. You'll see in this picture, now New Vrindavan at that time was a farmhouse, very, very small, very, very rustic. And all around were mountains. And it was so hard to get there. It would take hours and hours of driving to get there. So now all these hundreds of devotees, we had all come to be with Prabhupada, to celebrate Janmashtami, Vyasa Puja, and then the sannyasis. Now what happened was, when Prabhupada sent the sannyasis out to preach, they went to Boston, And it was ecstasy in Boston because they were all fired up with Sankirtan. They went to New York, and we all went to New York and had Maha Sankirtan all over New York City. And then they came to Philadelphia, which is a very small temple. In Philadelphia, that's where I had joined. There were only 4 of us in the temple. And the sannyasis, they shut themselves away in a room. We never saw them. Just when it was time for Sankirtan, they would come out, and those 4 and we 4, we would all go out on Sankirtan together. So we were all new devotees, and we were wondering what's going on in there, you know? What are they doing? Because we were all busy with our temple service and classes and cooking and deity work, everything. So it was there in Philadelphia that they started concocting this philosophy, saying that actually Prabhupada was God and we didn't realize it. And that's why Prabhupada has rejected us and left us. And we're all at fault. They were at fault, not the innocents. We were just doing what. So then it was time for the New Vrindavan festival. And there they were in Philadelphia. So we all got into a Sankirtan van together, those 4, us, the temple president stayed back to take care of the temple. There were 3 of us, and we all go off to New Vrindavan. And this New Vrindavan is like in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. Why do we want a temple in the middle of the mountains? But they wanted to make a self-sufficient farm. It makes, no, just turn it around better so it doesn't hit me, please. Thank you. They wanted to make a self-sufficient farm, and they had purchased the land without Prabhupada's permission, but what's done is done. So he said, all right, now you have the land. Now you make a new Vrindavan. You make 7 major temples with 7 farms and make everything like Vrindavan. So they then had a project, Kirtanananda, Swami, and Hayagriva. But when we all came here, because we were all from city temples, out doing Sankirtan every day and Sunday love feasts, and what are we doing here? You know, and Prabhupada didn't come, and the sannyasis, they had their own tent, and again, like in Philadelphia, they were just sitting in their tent talking all day, and then every once in a while they would come out of their tent to tell us new realizations they had about how offensive we all are, and Prabhupada left us because of our offenses. And we didn't know what was going on because everybody was new. It was 1970, you know. So my reaction was, because I had already seen what they were doing in Philadelphia, I said, I'm just going to go to the kitchen and cut potatoes. And the whole festival, I was so peaceful, cutting potatoes in the kitchen, because we had hundreds of devotees to feed. So if you're ever having difficulty philosophically, just go to the kitchen, start cutting potatoes, and you'll be safe. I didn't get, nothing. But other devotees, especially the men, because they're very philosophical, they took it very seriously, and they left. And they had nowhere to go. They just had mountains everywhere. So they just left. They went into the forest. They went into the hills. Nobody knew where they went. And they left the society because they were preaching Mayavadi philosophy. And Prabhupada was very upset by this. When Prabhupada heard this, he said, that is why I did not go. I knew this would happen. This is impersonalism. He defined the Mayavad impersonal misconception of the Guru and Krishna. If one says that the Guru is God, or if the Guru himself says that he is God, that is Mayavad philosophy. Now, this is when they were in good, there they are, the 4 of them, with Vishnu Jan leading the Sankirtan. And they were, so long as they were out preaching, everything was fine. It was just when they were in their little tent, cooking up this Mayavite philosophy that nearly destroyed the society. For the Mayavadis, spiritual realization is realization of one's identity with Brahman, the all-pervading spirit or oneness. Though sometimes speaking of bhakti and Krishna, Mayavadis mistakenly think that all names, forms, and activities, including those of Krishna and his devotees, are just facets of Maya. That's why they're called Mayavadis. For equating Krishna with Maya, they are called Mayavadis. Despite austerity and detachment from materialistic society, and despite much study of Vedanta Sutra and the commentaries of Sankara, traditional Mayavadis made this mistake, and modern Mayavadis, often neither austere nor detached nor studious, make the same blunder. A Mayavadi guru cannot reveal to his disciple the truth of the holy name of Krishna, the holy pastimes of Krishna, or the transcendental form of Krishna, since a Mayavadi considers all these Maya. Instead, the guru speaks of the oneness of all things, teaching the disciple that the concept of separate existence and ego is illusion. Such Mayavadis sometimes speak of the guru as a ladder who is used to reach a higher position of oneness. When no longer needed, the ladder is kicked away. Coughing intermittently and speaking with physical discomfort, Prabhupada explained the Mayavadi's dangerous misconceptions. The impersonalists held a cheap, mundane view of the guru's worship, and the guru's instructions. If one says that the guru is God, and God is not a person, then it follows logically that the guru has no eternal personal relationship with his disciples. Ultimately, the disciple will become equal to the guru, or in other words, he will realize that he too is God. Arguing from the Vedic scripture, Prabhupada refuted the Mayavadi's claims. The individual souls, he said, are Krishna's eternal servants, and this master-servant relationship is eternal. Service to Krishna, therefore, is spiritual activity. Only by serving the guru, however, can a disciple fully revive his eternal relationship with Krishna. The Vedic literature gives paramount importance to serving the spiritual master. He is the representative of God, the direct manifest link to God. No one can approach God but through him. Lord Krishna says, "Those who are directly my devotees are actually not my devotees, but those who are devotees of my servant, the spiritual master, are factually my devotees." For hours, Prabhupada drilled his disciples. This is Prabhupada in Japan with the sannyasis that he had there with him, and the few devotees who were living there in Japan preaching. For hours, Prabhupada drilled his disciples. He would pose a Mayavad argument, then ask his disciples to defeat it. If they failed, he would defeat it himself. He stressed that the relationship between the spiritual master and the disciple was eternal. So we have to remember that our relationship with our spiritual master is eternal. It goes on lifetime after lifetime. And when we take initiation, we're actually continuing our eternal relationship with our spiritual master. Not because the guru was Krishna, but because he was the confidential servant of Krishna eternally. A bona fide spiritual master never says that he is Krishna or that Krishna is impersonal. The devotees began to understand how the offenses of minimizing Srila Prabhupada's position were products of Mayavad philosophy. For the Mayavadi, to increase devotion to the Guru is unnecessary. If individual relationships are all ultimately illusion, why increase the illusion? If the master-servant relationship is ultimately illusion, then the less the disciple sees his Guru as master and himself as servant, the more he is advancing. The Mayavad philosophy was a subtle and insidious poison. So now Prabhupada was identifying what was that poison. It was Mayavad philosophy that had crept into the society. Why? Because these four sannyasis, they understood that they had done something wrong, and Prabhupada was sending them out from their big positions. They had nothing. They just had to go and preach all over the world. And they felt that they had offended Prabhupada by not recognizing him as Krishna. And that was where the mistake was. That was when they fell into Mayavad philosophy. So Prabhupada had to correct that. At least Prabhupada had been spared the pain of being personally present in New Vrindavan to witness the Mayavad rantings of certain of his disciples and the appalling display of ignorance of most of the others. Because we looked up to these sannyasis. We thought, no one knew that they were being punished. We thought Prabhupada was sending them out to preach, and they were all engaged in Sankirtan. And then they come up with this philosophy that nobody understood. And even the GBCs didn't know how, because the GBCs also respected the sannyasis. So he had his small entourage and was on his way to preach in India. While here in Tokyo, he would try to obtain many Back to Godhead magazines and Krishna books to take with him. Prabhupada observed Janmashtami at his apartment by having disciples read aloud to him from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, throughout the day. Now, this was a regular program for observing Janmashtami wherever Prabhupada was. He would have the devotees fast all day, and they would read Krishna book. They would take turns reading, passing the books around. Wherever Prabhupada was, that's where how he would observe Janmashtami. If they kept reading, he said, they might be able to finish the book in one day. The devotees had decorated Prabhupada. There was only one volume in those days. Now we have one volume, but it's 3 volumes condensed together. Originally, Krishna book was in 3 volumes. The devotees had decorated Prabhupada's room with leaves and flowers strung from the ceiling and along the walls, and Prabhupada sat on a thin mattress behind his low desk, hearing the pastimes of Krishna. At 9 p.m., after fasting all day, the devotees were still reading to him when he asked if they would be able to finish the book by midnight. The devotees replied that they would not. Then you stop, and I will read. Prabhupada opened a Sanskrit volume of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and for the next 2 hours chanted the Sanskrit verses. You cannot understand the Sanskrit, he said, but I know you can feel. The verses are so potent that just by hearing, one can be purified. During the reading, Kirtanananda Swami and Kartikeya Swami cooked a feast in the kitchen. At midnight, the devotees served Srila Prabhupada the Janmashtami feast. Taking only a few bites, he watched his disciples eat heartily. So that also, Prabhupada, we fast all day, and then when it's midnight, most of us gorge ourselves. We have to make up for not eating all day. But Prabhupada wasn't like that. I cooked for him, I know. We would put the plate out for him. It would hardly be touched, because who can eat at midnight? So we all eat at midnight. One time when Prabhupada was there in 1972, again, this is when everything got straightened out. And again, now Prabhupada had come back to New Vrindavan. And again, all the devotees came to be with Prabhupada. And, you have to observe an Ekadasi fast on that midnight feast. So the devotees were so untrained that they put peas in the vegetable. So, and the hundreds of devotees, and all this prasadam with peas in it. So Kirtanananda, he made an announcement to all the devotees before they started taking prasadam that just pick the peas out and don't eat them. Being practical, The next day was Vyasa Puja, Prabhupada's 74th birthday, and he went to the Tokyo ISKCON temple. The temple was only 2 rooms, one for living, one for worshipping, with Japanese grass mats on the floor. Prabhupada sat to the right of the altar looking at Lord Jagannath, while his disciples sat on the floor before him, singing Gurvastaka prayers, glorifying the spiritual master. None of them, however, knew exactly how to conduct the Vyasa Puja ceremony, and after a while they ended the kirtan. In the painfully awkward moments that followed, the devotees realized that they were supposed to do something special. But what? Prabhupada appeared angry. Don't you have Pushpanjali? Well, no one knew what Pushpanjali was. This is Sanskrit for offering of flowers. Isn't prasad ready? The devotees looked at one another. This is not Vyasa Puja, Prabhupada said. You have not been to Vyasa Puja before? No, they hadn't. So they didn't know what to do. Don't you know how to celebrate the Vyasa Puja? How to honor the spiritual master? One of the sannyasis began to cry. Tamal Krishna, Prabhupada said, didn't you see how I observed my Guru Maharaj's birthday? Where is Pushpa? No one knew what Pushpa was. These poor Americans. Pushpa? Pushpa? Tamal Krishna decided that Prabhupada must mean Pushpana, a fancy rice dish. I'm not sure, he said. What kind of Vyasa Puja is this with no Pushpa? Prabhupada asked. We can get some, Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna offered. Tamal grabbed Sudama. Prabhupada wants prasadam. He wants Pushpana rice. They ran into the kitchen and hurriedly started the rice. Meanwhile, in the temple, the devotees struggled through their version of a Vyasa Puja ceremony. Kirtanananda Swami stood and began to read aloud from the introduction of Krishna, the Reservoir of Pleasure, which included a short biography of Prabhupada. But Prabhupada interrupted, scolding his disciples for concocting and for acting improperly. If you don't know, he said, then why didn't you ask me how to do this properly? So we'll have to continue next week because it's way past 7 o'clock now. There's so much more to learn, and I'm sorry about that. Hare Krishna. Jai.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.